On the night a magnolia branch snapped in the storm, I learned something else had broken too, my own daughter's trust in me. While I was planting new roots, she was signing papers she did not understand, guided by a man who forged my name and called it protection. They tried to take my freedom with a signature. They tried to rewrite my mind with lies. But silence was never my weakness. It was the place I gathered proof. This is the story of how a mother fought back with documents instead of anger, with truth instead of fear, and with a compass that refused to lose its north. If you believe justice can be quiet and still change everything, stay with me. The late Savannah sun slanted across my porch like a blade of gold, slicing through the quiet with a precision that felt intentional. It struck the brass compass resting in my palm, warming the dented lid and making the needle shimmer as if it were breathing. My husband carried this compass for 30 years along the Georgia coast. When he died, I kept it the way sailors hold the last piece of home steady, but unsure what storms remain. I was running my thumb across the cool metal when a voice drifted through the cracked kitchen window. The window had always creaked open a hair in the heat, but today it felt like the world itself parted so I could hear what I was never meant to hear. "She will not resist," Marcus said. "Once we secure guardianship, the transfer is automatic." The compass trembled before I did. Guardianship, not assistance, not care. Legal control, permanent, sweeping, devastating if misused. I had reviewed those documents for decades as a forensic contract analyst. They were meant for elders without capacity, not women who still remembered every storm pattern on a map and every number in their bank ledger. My daughter's voice came next, softer, but the softness cut deeper than any blade. "Mom is slipping. Everyone sees it. This is the right thing." The porch boards pressed upward as if trying to keep me standing. I leaned closer to the window. The golden light sharpened across the compass face. My daughter believed him, or wanted to believe him to solve a problem I had not been trusted to know. Marcus lowered his tone. "We need to move before she changes beneficiaries again. Once the petition is filed, the judge will note her confusion. She mixed her pill schedule last month. That counts." I had not mixed anything. He had rearranged my medicine tray to simplify it. The memory hit with the sting of betrayal disguised as help. A slow breeze lifted the Spanish moss hanging from the oaks, the strands swaying like tired green curtains. Inside my home, the air grew still, my heartbeat once heavy and certain. Liana asked, "How soon can we do it? End of month," he said. "People trust paperwork. They do not question it. People trust paperwork." I knew that better than either of them. I had built a life on proving that documents reveal truth long before the people signing them do. My thumb slipped. The compass lid sprang open, flashing a sharp shard of gold against the wall like a silent alarm. For a suspended heartbeat, even the moss seemed frozen midair. Then the compass fell. It struck the porch with a sound too sharp for something so small, a clean metallic crack that split the world into two halves before I knew what they planned and after. Inside chairs scraped. Steps approached. I backed into the porch shadows and knelt to grab the compass. The needle inside spun wildly, circling without direction, mirroring the way my daughter's voice had severed my ground. Marcus's whisper cut the silence. Probably the wind. She cannot tell what she hears anymore. Not confusion, not decline, narrative construction. He was rehearsing the story a judge would later read. I stepped inside the house. They stood near the stairs. Liana's face shifted surprise, then a smile practiced enough to hide the rest. She walked toward me with the softness of someone convinced she was acting out of love, not manipulation. "Mom," she said, "we were thinking about scheduling another doctor's appointment, just to make sure you were doing all right." Marcus added, "It is important at your age." At your age. A small phrase, but it rearranged the air between us. Something in Liana's posture tilted subtly toward him, a recalibration of loyalty, a shifting of gravity. "Do you need anything?" she asked. "No," I said. I walked past them with the slow, deliberate steadiness of someone crossing a tightrope. My dignity felt solid even as my compass remained dented. In the hallway mirror, dusk caught my reflection. A black woman of 67 shoulders, squared eyes steady. Eyes that once read contracts line by line without missing a comma. Eyes that walked through widowhood without collapsing. Eyes that raised a daughter through storms no one saw. But the reflection had changed, not because of age, because of fracture. From behind me, Marcus murmured, "See." She gets confused. It was not confusion. It was restraint. Anger leaves fingerprints. Silence leaves none. Silence remembers. Silence documents. I closed my hand around the compass. The needle twitched, then froze again. Perhaps the compass was waiting for me to choose a direction. I went to my study and shut the door. The room darkened into the blue hour where lies lose their camouflage. I set the compass on my desk. The dent in the lid caught the last ray of light in a crooked shimmer. I opened my notebook. If they wanted paperwork, then paperwork would speak. I wrote the first line of my own record, not what they claimed happened, what actually happened. The altered pill tray, the questions about my accounts, the whispers meant to sound concerned, but shaped to be used in a courtroom. Guardianship was not help. It was a cage polished to look like care. Once filed, it could strip a woman of her home, her accounts, even her autonomy. They believed I would not understand the documents. They forgot who taught Liana to read before she signed anything. The house went quiet. I kept writing. Every detail, every slip, every attempt to shrink my reality. They were drafting my downfall. They forgot I had spent my life mastering the language of evidence. The compass needle twitched once more, then steadied. They think I no longer know the way home. But tonight I found the first sign on the road back. The last beam of daylight slid across my living room like a narrow blade laid gently on the floor. Dust drifted through it, rising in small spirals as if the house exhaled. I ran a finger along the armrest and lifted a thin veil of dust I was certain I had wiped yesterday. Something in this house was moving when I was not. Or someone. I sat still, letting the silence settle around me. Not the kind that brings peace. The kind that waits alert and listening. My breath grew shallow. The wooden clock on the mantel ticked once, and the sound traveled farther than it should have, cracking the room open in a quiet warning. Then a soft click came from the hallway, a sound too light to be intentional, too controlled to be random. My eyes shifted toward the table where my medication tray sat, crooked-angled in a way I would never leave it. The orange bottle in front was turned with the label backward. Another bottle was missing entirely. Suspicion found shape. I rose and crossed the floor slowly. The boards creaked under my weight but did not echo. My house was old enough to know when to keep its secrets. I picked up the tray and counted the pills. The numbers did not match what I had logged yesterday morning. 1 dose taken when I had not taken anything. A dose removed to create a pattern I did not recognize. Medication tampering is subtle, almost invisible, which is why guardianship courts treat it as a red flag. Shifts in routine, missed doses, signs of incompetence that someone else stage manages. I inhaled deeply and put the tray back, aligning each bottle with the edge. If they were collecting evidence, then so was I. As the sun lowered, the room deepened into amber. The air carried the faint sweetness of magnolia blooms from the front garden, a scent my daughter used to love when she was small. On summer nights, she would run barefoot across the yard collecting petals and bringing them to me like treasure. Back then, I thought nurturing a child alone through divorce had built something unbreakable between us. I did not know fracture could be so quiet, or come from someone who once clung to my hand to feel safe. The phone buzzed on the counter, lighting up with a reminder I did not recall scheduling. Dr. Ellison. Follow-up appointment. Tomorrow, 9:15 a.m. I had not made that appointment. My medical portal always sent double confirmations, yet none had arrived. Someone had used my account. I felt a tightening in my chest, not from fear, but clarity. Guardianship petitions often include irregular medical compliance as supporting evidence, missed appointments, confusion about schedules, forgetfulness documented by an outsider and gently reinforced by a family member. The house settled again the way old houses do at dusk, but something about the sound was off. I moved toward the hallway and past the magnolia-patterned wallpaper, brushing my fingers across a petal so faded it looked like a ghost of bloom. The motif of the compass echoed in my mind: direction, orientation, knowing truth when someone tries to move it by inches. I opened the closet. The cedar smell rushed out familiar and grounding, but the hook to the left was bare. The metal box that once held my spare keys was gone. For a moment, my mind offered mercy. Maybe I moved it. Maybe I tucked it somewhere else during a busy morning. But the faint imprint on the wooden shelf told the truth. A square of dust disturbed by fingers that were not mine. My heartbeat shifted pace, not in panic, but recognition. I walked to the back door. The lock sat misaligned, turned by someone who tried to be careful but did not understand the old mechanism. I leaned closer and breathed in. The air carried a faint trace of cologne, the same sharp scent Marcus wore at the wedding last year, the scent that had lingered in my foyer for hours after he hugged me too tightly for a man who insisted on keeping boundaries. He had been inside, not by accident, not with permission, inside my home, inside my life, quietly changing the shape of things until I no longer recognized my own patterns. This was not meddling. This was groundwork for guardianship, for control, for erasing my ability to disagree. A floorboard murmured under my foot as I turned back toward the living room. My reflection in the glass door looked older under the thinning light, but steadier. Silence wrapped around me like a second skin. It did not feel empty anymore. It felt like a witness. I moved to my study and opened the drawer of my desk. The compass lay inside, catching the last shimmer of daylight. The needle twitched once before settling north, steady and unbothered. That small motion strengthened me. Truth has direction even when people try to bend it. I placed my notebook beside it. My handwriting looked firmer than I felt, but I wrote facts without emotion. Dates, times, pills, alarms, locks, odd movements, a clandestine appointment, a missing key. I took photographs with timestamps, saved them in duplicate folders, and emailed one set to an account only I knew. Slow documentation, precise, quiet. Exactly what elder advocates tell you to do when someone tries to build a false narrative around you. Outside, a car engine turned over, slow, lingering, the kind of idling meant to observe rather than leave. I moved to the window without lifting the curtain. A dark sedan sat across the street, headlights off. After 30 seconds, it pulled away, but not in a hurry. Someone was monitoring my routines, my lights, my movements, my vulnerabilities. I clicked off the study lamp and let the room fall into darkness. The compass glowed faintly in the moonlight. The house exhaled again, this time with me. They believed my silence meant consent. They believed age meant weakness. They believed guardianship was a straight path, and I would not see the steps they laid. But they forgot something important. Silence remembers. They forgot I spent a lifetime navigating storms others never saw. The drawer resisted when I pulled it, catching on something inside as if an unseen hand held it back. When it finally jerked open, a folded document slid forward and struck my wrist. The paper unfurled just enough for a single word to catch the morning light. Guardianship. The air thinned around me. The ceiling fan above clicked once, then again, each rotation a slow countdown. I lifted the sheet with 2 fingers, afraid the ink might stain my skin. A draft lay before me, clean margins, highlighted sections, typed lines that looked too prepared to be accidental. Petition for temporary guardianship, proposed ward, Nora Whitmore. Petitioners, Liana Whitmore and Marcus Hayes. My daughter's name beside his. The fracture hit in silence. A small, precise break inside the ribs. I opened the rest of the folder. Accusations written in soft phrases filled the page. Observed confusion, medication inconsistency, concerns regarding financial stability, words structured to sound clinical, words meant to erase my authority one sentence at a time. A sticky note clung to the corner. Marcus's handwriting slanted and disciplined. Finish this before next week. The fan clicked overhead rhythm steady like a metronome guiding someone else's countdown. I set the draft on the bedspread. My reflection in the window behind it looked older in the morning light, but also clearer. Betrayal has a way of sharpening the edges of a person. I folded the document and slipped it under my arm. The brass compass on my desk caught a narrow beam of light and flashed across the wall. I picked it up and placed it in my pocket. The needle quivered once, then pointed north. A small truth in a house where things were being quietly moved off course. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled faintly of magnolia from the open window. The refrigerator hummed in a soft, steady tone. Even the appliances sounded different now, as if the house was waiting for the next reveal. I spread the papers across the kitchen table and forced myself to read every line. My hand did not shake at first. It steadied around the habits of my past life, the life where I reviewed contracts and medical decisions with Liana when she was too overwhelmed after the divorce to think straight. I had been her compass then, support, clarity, direction. Now she was preparing a document to remove mine. I picked up my phone and dialed the number from the elder legal support list I had requested months ago. A voice answered, "Whitfield Law." "This is Nora Whitmore," I said. "I found a draft guardianship petition naming me as the ward." A pause. Not of disbelief, but recognition. "Hold for Ms. Adler." 2 clicks, then a calm, controlled voice. "Mrs. Whitmore, tell me exactly what you found." I described the draft. The note from Marcus, the irregular medication, the added appointment I had not scheduled, the missing spare keys, the altered door lock. I did not dramatize. I stated facts the way a forensic accountant might describe discrepancies. Ms. Adler's typing paused. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you currently have an active power of attorney assigned to your daughter?" "Yes." "Medical. 3 years ago." That is the first lever they will use. With it, they can shape your medical narrative. They can schedule evaluations you have not requested. They can imply cognitive decline without explicitly stating it. The ceiling fan clicked again, a sharp sound that carried through the phone. "Mrs. Whitmore," she continued, "what you found is not simple family overreach. It is a pre-petition structure. They are building grounds before filing. Grounds, evidence, and engineered decline." My fingers grazed the edge of the petition. A sting shot across my skin. The paper sliced me cleanly, a bright line of red, beading along the margin next to the typed allegation of confusion. The first paper cut. Not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. Ms. Adler. I asked, my voice steadier than I felt, what happens if they file this. Her answer came without hesitation. "If this draft becomes a petition, the court will assume incapacity unless proven otherwise. Guardianship reverses the burden. They take control. You fight to reclaim it." The refrigerator hummed louder. The fan clicked twice more. The air felt suddenly narrow. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, voice firm but not unkind. "If they file this document, they will control every legal, medical, and financial decision tied to your name." The words pressed against my chest like a heavy hand. I looked at the magnolia-patterned wallpaper in the hall. One bloom faded from years of sunlight. A memory surfaced Liana at 8 years old, placing fresh magnolias in a chipped vase I kept on the windowsill. She told me flowers were proof that people could grow again after breaking. I believed her then. Now she was preparing to break me. Ms. Adler. I said, "What do I do first? Document everything. Dates, times, changed routines, any sign of POA misuse or medical manipulation. And revoke the power of attorney as soon as possible. We will file protective orders if needed." I gathered every document into a neat stack. Control begins with order. I walked to my study and set the compass on top of the papers. Its needle vibrated lightly, then locked north again, as if reminding me that truth still pointed somewhere. I opened my notebook, recorded the date, the time, the exact angle of the drawer when I found the draft, the scent of magnolia in the hall, the cut on my thumb, the sticky note, the handwriting, the fan's relentless clicking, each detail a brick in the wall I was quietly building around my autonomy. Outside, a car rolled slowly past my house, too slow for casual driving. The engine idled, paused, then eased forward again. A silhouette lingered behind the windshield before disappearing down the street. They were not waiting for signs of my decline. They were creating them. I closed the blinds halfway, letting slivers of light cut across the desk. The compass glowed in one narrow strip, bright enough to cast a long shadow across the guardianship draft. My hand trembled once as I reached for the pen. The magnolia tree cast a long shadow across the yard, its wide branches bending just enough for late afternoon sunlight to draw a thin halo around the figure standing beneath it. At first glance, the silhouette seemed too still, too squared at the shoulders, too reminiscent of Marcus, a shape that marked territory rather than shared space. But then the light shifted, tracing the outline of a woman I knew by memory more than sight. Liana. My daughter stood half in sunlight and half in the magnolia's shade, as if her body itself hesitated between confession and retreat. A dried petal drifted down and brushed my forearm. When I caught it, it snapped cleanly in half. The sound, barely more than a whisper, felt like a small bone breaking inside me. She did not wave. She did not smile. She waited. I stepped down from the porch, feeling the boards creak under my weight. The path to her felt longer than it had ever been. Every footstep pressed into the soil as though my body carried years of something: unnamed disappointment, worry, unspoken hurt. "Mom," she said, almost formal. Liana, I answered, because using her name felt safer than claiming her when I did not know who she had become. Wind moved through the magnolia leaves, brushing her hair gently to one side. The gesture should have softened her face. It didn't. Her expression held a firmness I recognized only from the worst years of her divorce, the years she lived, terrified of losing love again. I tried to read her eyes, searching for the softness that had once made her run into my arms after school, or the resolve she carried when she first spoke in court for herself. But this version of her was new, worn down, stretched thin, across something heavy. "Why are you here?" I asked. "I needed to talk before you heard it from anyone else," she said. Her fingers twisted at the hem of her sleeve. "Before things get misunderstood." The words sat between us, thick with implication. I nodded slowly. "Then talk." She glanced toward the porch, toward the windows, toward the familiar corners of a home she once called her safe place. And then she looked back at me with eyes wet but unwavering. "Mom," I knew what guardianship meant. The air around us stilled. Even the magnolia branches seemed to hold their breath. "I was not tricked," she continued. "I was not manipulated." I agreed. I helped draft the petition. A fresh petal fell between us like a verdict. "You helped?" The question scraped out of my throat. "Yes." Her voice wavered but did not break. "I love Marcus. He owes $80,000. If he loses his job or gets sued, or if anything collapses around him, I go down too. We go down together." It was not just the words that hurt. It was the strange steadiness behind them. She believed she was saving something. "All my life," she said, swallowing hard, "I've watched everything fall apart once someone gave up on us. I told myself I would never let that happen again. So when Marcus said we needed to act fast, I thought, maybe if I took control, I could prevent the collapse." She drew in a shaky breath. "I was trying to protect my family." I stared at her. The woman who stood in the magnolia's shadow was not the daughter I raised, not the child who climbed into my bed when the thunder scared her, not the young woman who whispered after her divorce, "I don't know how to rebuild." This woman had decided rebuilding meant sacrificing someone else. Family, I repeated quietly. And where do I fit into that? The question struck her visibly. Her chin trembled. Her eyes shut for a moment as if she needed darkness to stabilize herself. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "But Marcus said the court looks for signs of instability. Things like medication mix-ups or missed appointments. We just had to document a few things to meet the criteria. It was temporary. It was supposed to help us catch up financially. The pieces aligned, the shifted pill bottles, the mysterious appointment notifications, the subtle rearranging of my routines. Liana," I said gently, "you were the one documenting me." Her breath caught. She didn't deny it. Something cold slid down my spine, not anger, but an old maternal grief, resurfacing with a sharper shape. Shame, not mine, hers, and heartbreak, mine. "You believed him that much?" I asked. She wiped her cheek with the heel of her palm. "I believed fear," she admitted. "Fear of losing him. Fear of losing stability. Fear of going back to being the woman begging a landlord for extra time just to keep the lights on." She stepped forward, then hesitated. "Mom, you're strong. You don't need anyone. I thought maybe you would understand if I just did what had to be done." Another magnolia petal fell, landing on my hand. It crumbled into powder the moment my fingers closed around it. My daughter had not betrayed me out of greed or convenience. She chose fear over the truth. "I never needed you to save him," I said quietly, "but I did hope you would save yourself." She backed away as if the words themselves pushed her. When she reached her car, the sunlight struck the window and fractured her reflection into shards. She looked smaller, as though the glass reflected her doubt rather than her shape. Her hand trembled on the doorframe. She almost returned. I saw it. A flicker. A wish. A moment where she nearly stepped out of fear's shadow. But she closed the door instead. The engine hummed. The car rolled down the driveway. Magnolia petals lifted in the wind like the soft debris of something newly broken. When silence returned, it felt heavier than her presence. I stood alone under the magnolia tree and whispered the truth I had resisted since the day Marcus entered her life. The lamp flickered once before steadying, stretching my shadow across the desk until it touched the sealed folder like a warning. The magnolia petal lay beside it, pale against the wood curled at the edges, as if shrinking from what was inside. When I lowered myself into the chair, the room released a slow breath. Houses learn the rhythm of their owners. Tonight, mine seemed to brace itself. I opened the folder. A thin scent of toner drifted upward, a smell I had known during my years, auditing grants and sifting through legal submissions. But this felt heavier. The paper shifted with a faint hiss, like something alive adjusting under a blanket. Each page caught the amber light and sent it back in fractured glints. My name appeared at the top of the first page. Below it, a signature that tried to be mine. A loan agreement dated 3 months ago. Principal $10,000. Terms aggressive enough to bruise a person's financial standing if even a single payment was late. My hand tightened. The forged signature curved upward at the wrong angle, too eager, too performative. The real me signs with steadiness learned from decades of making sure every digit and declaration would stand in court. Whoever did this mimicked me without understanding me. I ran my thumb along the paper. It felt warm, but the truth beneath it was cold. I turned to the next sheet. Another signature that wasn't mine this time beneath a digital authorization box. A certificate ID linked not to me but to a private email address belonging to Liana. The ceiling fan clicked overhead, counting seconds, while I searched the metadata that accompanied the page. The timestamp glowed like a small, merciless lantern. The authorization had been executed on an evening Marcus told me he was meeting a contractor. According to the system log, the document was accessed from a device registered inside their home. That contradiction carved through the air between us, even though they were not in the room. My chest tightened with a slow ache. Was Liana complicit or simply unaware? That question had followed me through every hour of this quiet unraveling. The lamp hummed, casting a steady beam across the second folder sitting beside my elbow. I opened it. This one held digital forensic reports my attorney sent earlier that day. Metadata chains, signature comparisons, access logs. They rustled like dry leaves. One printout caught my eye immediately. Ellington Transfer Draft.df. The name Ellington belonged to the community fund I had supported for years. Small donations, quiet stability. The draft document requested a transfer of $10,000, pulling from an account I always kept separate from family. My signature line waited at the bottom. I had never seen this draft. My stomach tightened as I checked the timestamp. 11:47 p.m., the same night Marcus claimed he and Liana fell asleep early. The revision history showed several attempts to replicate my signature using an archived scan from a medical intake form. The strokes revealed hesitation on every curve, confidence only on the straight lines. The signature of a person afraid of being caught, yet convinced they had no choice. The magnolia petal shifted when my elbow brushed the table. It slid toward the keyboard, fragile and weightless. Its movement felt like the room pointing at the truth. I expanded the advanced metadata viewer. A soft chime sounded. The screen brightened bleaching shadows from the room. A cached credential surfaced. Marcus Vale, Authcache. My pulse stilled. Beneath it, a red line pulsed with a timestamp and notation. Preparing transfer before guardianship approval. The magnolia petal fell from the table. It hit the floor with a faint crack. The sound was so small, yet it split something in me. A person can believe lies until a line like that appears. Then the lies collapse under their own weight. I steadied my breath. Guardianship approval. They were planning to restrict my rights before I even knew they had petitioned for them. And if this transfer had succeeded, it would have looked legal, authorized, voluntary. Sunlight could not have revealed their intentions more clearly. I pushed aside the folder and opened my secure notepad. The tip of my pen moved without hesitation. Timestamps, forged strokes, certificate mismatch, financial intent, medical narrative inconsistencies. Each line built a structure. I had spent my life reviewing paper trails other people wished no one would follow. Now I was tracing one designed to erase me. Another thought formed, quiet, sharp, unmistakable. If they had forged my name for $10,000, they could do it for more. They could try again. They could attempt a transfer tied to my house, my savings, the life I built alone after Malcolm died. People who erase you once rarely stop with a single attempt. A gust of wind pressed against the window pane. The glass trembled. My lamp steadied itself against the force. I forced myself to picture the consequences if the forged signature had been accepted by the bank. My accounts frozen. My financial independence gone. My decisions subject to oversight by the very people who planned to strip me of them. My hand tightened around the pen. This was no misunderstanding. This was preparation. I leaned down and retrieved the magnolia petal. It crumbled between my fingers, turning to dust that clung faintly to my skin. The motif of a season that had passed, the reminder that beauty can be used as a distraction or as a warning. I gathered the documents and slid them into a fireproof box beneath my desk. Not fear, evidence, not suspicion, proof. When I closed the lid, the lock clicked with a sound that steadied me. My voice rose in a whisper I had not planned. A forged signature speaks louder than the person who forged it. But the real truth settled in my bones like the weight of a verdict. If this was how easily they borrowed my name, then somewhere in their minds I had already been erased. People who erase you once never stop at one attempt. The question was no longer what they forged. It was what they planned to take next. Rain threaded through the narrow alley behind my house, falling in silver lines that splintered beneath the dim street lamp. Every drop struck the tin awning with a measured tap, steady enough to feel intentional. The air smelled of wet magnolia bark, the same scent Malcolm used to say meant the truth was close, even when people tried to bury it. I let the storm breathe around me, grounding me in a way nothing else had in weeks. My phone vibrated once. Jordan was here. I stepped inside just as a figure ran through the alley, hood pulled tight, backpack pressed to his side. He climbed the porch steps 2 at a time, pushing his hood back and blinking rain from his lashes. Despite the storm, he looked determined. "Thank you for calling me Miss Whitlow," he said, breath visible in the cold. "When you said urgent, I came immediately." That had always been Jordan's nature. 22, sharp, earnest. A law school intern, I once helped win a scholarship because I believed he saw the world clearly. He carried that clarity now, along with something steadier conviction. I led him to the dining table. The carved magnolia design along its edges held small pools of lamplight. At the center sat the fireproof evidence box. Jordan nodded toward it, his expression shifting from respect to readiness. "We start here," he said. I opened the box. He reviewed the forged signatures, the metadata reports, the file draft Marcus edited in secret. His eyes narrowed as he flipped page after page. "This is structured," he said. "Patterns like these only appear when someone plans to win before you even enter the fight." I felt a quiet steadiness rising in me. Patterns do not hide from people like us. Jordan opened his laptop fingers, moving with controlled urgency. The rain hit harder now, drumming against the windows in irregular rhythms. It sounded like the storm was trying to speak. "Ms. Whitlow," he said, "is there any device they could have accessed without your knowledge? Phones, tablets." Something left unattended. I paused. The tablet. An old one Malcolm had given me on our 33rd anniversary. I used it for reading. It had been in my nightstand drawer for months. Marcus once offered to help update it after a system glitch, connecting it to his phone in the process. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now the memory tightened inside my chest. I retrieved the tablet and handed it to Jordan. He unlocked it with my passcode and began a search. He moved through the system logs with the precision of someone who refused to miss what mattered. A folder blinked at him, then another. He opened an audio file with a timestamp from a night I vaguely remembered waking with a dry throat and the feeling that something was off. Jordan pressed play. A faint rustle filled the room, bedding shifting. My breath slow and heavy with sleep. Then Marcus's voice close enough that I felt the echo of warmth along my ear. "Nora, wake up." "Say that again." My own half-asleep mumble followed slurred, not from confusion but from dreaming. Jordan froze the playback. The waveform on the screen looked jagged, torn from its context. He exhaled slowly. This is the kind of clip someone could present to a guardianship evaluator as proof of disorientation, he said. They could use it to justify a cognitive exam. During that exam, a judge could freeze your accounts, pending review. You could lose authority to make your own medical decisions. This was not careless. This was aimed. Thunder rolled through the alley. The magnolia petal I had carried earlier trembled on the table and folded inward like a dying leaf. The betrayal did not feel emotional this time. It felt structural, as if someone had tried to rebuild the truth in their own image. Jordan clicked open the internal access logs. 3 recorded unlocks, all occurring when I was asleep, all connected to Marcus's phone via the Bluetooth pairing he had set up months ago. The realization pressed against my ribs. "He recorded me," I said. "More than that," Jordan said. "He curated you." He opened the transcript generator. Words filled the screen, my words, but hollowed out of meaning. Fragmented phrases that could easily be interpreted as cognitive decline by someone looking to confirm it. I felt my breath shorten. I had reviewed hundreds of cases involving falsified narratives. Never had I imagined I would become one of them. Jordan leaned forward. "This is privacy violation at minimum and manipulation of medical narrative. Courts take this seriously. If we link these clips with financial intent, it becomes a pattern of exploitation. The word exploitation cut through the room. I looked toward the rain. The alley gleamed with reflections from the street lamp water swirling in thin streams along the pavement. Malcolm and I used to walk that alley during summer storms. He would place his hand on my back and say the same line every time the air smelled like magnolia. Truth finds its way. Water always knows the low places. I felt that memory settle like a hand between my shoulders, steadying me. I thought they wanted control, I said quietly. Now I see they wanted a narrative. Jordan nodded. And you are going to break it. He continued tracing digital footprints. Each log, each access attempt, each paired device built a more complete picture. They were preparing the ground, he said, to make you look confused, to make guardianship appear protective instead of predatory. A silence settled between us, heavy but clarifying. Betrayal had a sound I realized. It was not loud. It was the quiet click of a device unlocked when you were asleep, the soft scrape of an audio file edited at midnight, the false narrative hiding under the guise of concern. Jordan closed the laptop gently. This is enough to dismantle any guardianship attempt, he said, and it is enough to expose motive. I nodded. My voice felt stronger than it had in days. When truth begins to speak, I said no one gets to turn it off. Jordan gave a small, steady smile. Then we keep going. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a new notification. A video file had arrived from an unknown number. No message, no name, only the title. Your next evaluation. The storm outside no longer sounded like rain. It sounded like the beginning of a countdown. The cafe windows were so large they seemed to swallow the entire street, turning the rain outside into a shifting curtain of liquid glass. Our reflections floated upon it before I even stepped inside, stretched and pulled by the water trails until none of us looked entirely whole. The barista's steamer hissed sharply, fogging the lower edge of the window. In that fog, 3 shapes merged and separated again. Me, my daughter, and the man who believed he could decide which way my life would turn. When I sat the compass inside my purse, shifted its faint metallic tap against my wallet, sounding like a small verdict. The table smelled faintly of citrus oil and fresh espresso. A soft jazz track drifted from the speakers above, too calm for what waited between us. Liana sat stiffly at the table, both hands wrapped around a mug she had not touched. Her shoulders rose and fell with shallow breaths. The reflection behind her looked taller, steadier, as if her truth were trying to reach the surface before she could speak it. Marcus rested one arm across the back of her chair, claiming space that was not his to claim. His smile was courteous, almost warm, except for the calculation in his eyes. "Nora," he said, "thank you for meeting us. We are worried about you." His voice carried the practiced softness of a man who had rehearsed manipulation long enough to mistake it for compassion. I set my purse beside me. I came to return something. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the purse, then to my expression. His reflection in the window rippled, warped by the movement of the rain. The server came by to take orders. None of us asked for anything. The tension had its own temperature. I reached into my purse. The compass brushed against my fingers as if reminding me to stay aligned. I placed a folder on the table and slid it toward the center with deliberate calm. Marcus leaned forward. "Now, before you say anything, we should remember that forging documents is a serious accusation. Memory can get tricky at your age. Maybe you saw something and misinterpreted it." Liana flinched. I opened the folder. The forged loan agreement, the mismatched certificate logs, the revision history tied to his cached credentials, the transfer draft Marcus edited at 11:47 p.m. I watched Liana's eyes widen at each page, her fingertips tightening around her mug. Marcus released a slow exhale. "Nora, metadata misleads people all the time. You know that. You used to work with these files. Isn't it possible you wrote incomplete notes, that you... Isn't it possible you wrote incomplete notes that you forgot their context? My notes do not forget, I said. His jaw twitched. I pulled out the tablet Jordan had analyzed. When I set it on the table, Liana's posture stiffened. Marcus's reflection behind him fractured on the rain-streaked glass, splitting his face into uneven shards. I brought only enough evidence to clarify the conversation, I said. I tapped the screen. The audio file opened, rustling bedding, my breathing. Then Marcus's whisper, too close, too intimate. Nora, wake up. Say that again. The cafe went quiet around us despite the low music, as if the room itself listened. Marcus lunged for the tablet, stabbing the pause button. This is not what it sounds like. She was confused. I was checking on her. She wanders at night. I looked at Liana. I was asleep. Marcus barked a laugh. She forgets things. She forgot to pay a bill last month. She misplaces important items. You know how we have tried to help. Liana's gaze flicked to me. Mom, did you really forget a bill? No, I replied. Marcus changed my auto pay settings. I have proof. I placed the account change statement in front of her. Her breath caught in her throat. Marcus forced another smile. Sweetheart, your mother is overwhelmed. She is misreading things. Liana's fingers shook as she held the document. She studied the signature on the digital transfer form, next, her eyes narrowing. Something in her expression shifted. Marcus, she whispered, this looks like my old handwriting. He rolled his eyes. Of course it does. You signed it quickly. You forget your own signatures sometimes. I slid the next page toward her, rotating it gently. Look again. She leaned in slowly, as if the paper carried heat. She traced the first curve of the forged signature with the tip of her nail. Her eyes shimmered under the cafe light's moisture gathering at their edges. That loop, she said quietly. I stopped writing it like that when I was 19. Marcus tensed. A small bead of sweat broke at his temple despite the cool air. Liana, he said sharply, you are remembering this wrong. She didn't respond. She lifted another page. Another forged version of her signature, another mimicry of who she used to be. Her breath hitched, her free hand pressed against her stomach as if steadying something breaking open inside. You copied me, she said, voice trembling but unmistakably clear. You copied my signature. Marcus leaned forward. Stop. Think. You sign things fast. You forget. You always have. Her reflection in the window stood straighter than she did, as if her truest self had finally arrived. No, she said. I remember exactly how I changed my signature. I changed it because you told me I should. You said long loops looked immature. The realization hit her all at once, her face tightened, pain and recognition weaving together. You used my name. You took out a loan in my handwriting. You told me Mom was the problem. You recorded her without her knowing. You told me it was for her safety. Marcus reached for her arm. She pulled it away with a speed that cut through the air. The cafe seemed to still. Only the rain continued its tapping like fingers against a window, demanding to be heard. Marcus pushed his chair back abruptly, metal scraping against wood. You two are ungrateful, he said, voice cracking. I have carried this family. I have protected both of you. No, I said. You tried to own us. He stared at me, then at Liana. Something in his mask broke. He stood and walked out into the rain, but his reflection in the glass lagged behind for a moment, breaking apart in streaks of silver before dissolving completely. Liana's shoulders crumpled. She reached instinctively for my purse, her fingers brushing the brass surface of the compass as though grounding herself. Mom, she whispered, how long has he been doing this to us? I closed the folder with calm finality. The compass inside shifted one last time, its needle aligning as if it had finally found direction after weeks of spinning. Long enough, I said. Her eyes lifted to mine. At last, she finally recognized her own reflection in the mirror. As I prepared to speak again, my phone vibrated. A voicemail alert appeared. Marcus's voice filled the screen, time-stamped only minutes after he walked away. He had not left to surrender. He had left to strike back. The courtroom held a kind of cold that did not belong to weather. It was the cold of decisions that changed the shape of a family. Light spilled from the high windows in long silver columns, catching dust that drifted like suspended seconds. When I placed my hand over the compass in my purse, the brass felt warmer than the room itself, as if it knew I would need its steadiness. I sat upright, shoulders back, breath measured. Across the aisle, Marcus whispered to his attorney with the certainty of a man who believed the outcome had already been purchased. Liana sat beside him, fingers tangled in her lap eyes, fixed on the floor. Her hair was pulled back too tightly the way she used to do when she was afraid to show emotion. For a moment, I saw the child she once was. Then, the child vanished. The clerk called the case. Papers shuffled, shoes clicked. Every sound landed like a punctuation mark. "Mrs. Ellington," the judge said, "you may begin." I rose slowly. The compass shifted inside my purse, turning just enough for me to feel the movement. My voice, when it came, was steady. "Your Honor, the petition for guardianship claims I am unable to manage my finances or medical decisions. What you will see today is not a concern for my well-being. It is a coordinated plan built over months." Marcus leaned back, amused. His attorney smirked. They were ready for the performance. They thought I would deliver a confused woman defending herself with sentiment. Instead, I opened the folder. The first document slid across the table with a whisper. "This is a forged contract," I said. My signature was copied from a 2019 Power of Attorney draft. The digital certificate metadata shows the signature was lifted and pasted from a separate file. Timestamped 19 minutes past 11 on a morning when Marcus claimed he was out of state. Marcus shifted. The attorney's jaw tightened. I continued. "This is the audio clip presented as evidence of my supposed confusion. But this recording was made while I was asleep. The file name matches a batch of phone memos captured on a device Marcus registered under his business account." I nodded toward the back row where Jordan sat with a small laptop and a quiet confidence that belied his age. The judge motioned. Jordan stepped forward. Calm, respectful, every gesture grounded. He explained the metadata trail, the mismatched time zones, the device identifiers. When he spoke of access patterns of files renamed within seconds of creation, the courtroom leaned forward. Even the air felt different. The judge turned to Marcus. "Do you dispute this analysis?" His answer arrived too quickly. "Of course I do. She is twisting data. Mrs. Ellington has been confused for months. It was not the words that betrayed him. It was the panic he tried to swallow." I placed another document on the table. "Your Honor, this is a revocable trust amendment Marcus attempted to file using my name. It would grant him beneficiary rights upon my incapacity. He planned the incapacity first." Liana flinched. A breath caught in her throat. When I looked at her, she did not look away. Her eyes trembled the way they had when she was 10 and had broken a window, terrified I would be disappointed. Shame lived in that look, but also awakening. The judge requested the final file. I handed it over Ellington Transfer Draft PDF. A chill moved through the room as she examined the screen. This document, she said, was created on the same afternoon Mr. Whitford told the court he had no involvement in Mrs. Ellington's affairs. Jordan approached again, pointing to the digital trail. He tested 3 versions of the signature. 2 failed to authenticate. The last one passed long enough to be printed. When the audio evidence played, the judge leaned back, expression sharpening. The recording held the soft murmur of my sleep, followed by a deliberate splice to simulate confusion. Then another splice. Then another. The manipulation was crude but intentional. When the clip ended, the courtroom shifted as if the entire room had exhaled. The judge folded her hands, the gesture slow and final. "Mr. Whitford, what you attempted is not guardianship. It is orchestration. And this court will not allow the law to become your instrument." Her voice carried more weight than any gavel. Petition denied. Fraud investigation authorized. Emergency protection order granted to Mrs. Ellington. This matter is now referred to the district attorney for review. Marcus's face drained of color. He did not look at his attorney. He looked toward the exit as if searching for a door that had already disappeared. Liana pressed her hands over her mouth. Tears gathered, sliding down before she could stop them. Yet she did not cry for me. Not yet. She cried for the collapse of the image she had built around her marriage, for the shattering of illusions she had helped defend. The bailiff approached Marcus. "Sir, you will need to step outside." He stood slowly. Before leaving, he turned his head toward me. His face was pale, but his eyes carried a frantic calculation. Not anger, not denial. The look of a man who had lost his leverage and now searched for any remaining shadow to hide in. My hand rested on the compass again. It lay still, steady. His storm could not move it. Liana finally looked at me. Really looked. Not as an aging mother she believed needed control. Not as an obstacle. As a woman who had survived something she did not yet understand. "Mom," she whispered. I did not answer. Not because I lacked forgiveness, but because forgiveness requires truth, and truth had only begun to surface. As Marcus disappeared through the back door, escorted and silent, the judge addressed me directly. "Mrs. Ellington," she said, "your restraint is notable. Your case continues on the civil docket. Prepare for discovery." I nodded. My silence had never been surrender. It had been strategy. I stepped out of the courtroom into the hall where the sunlight felt softer, warmer, more willing to land on someone who had been doubted for so long. The wind did not merely move through the magnolia that morning. It tore loose the petals the way truth, tears loose denial. Pale fragments spun across the yard in spirals, striking the porch rail with soft, brittle taps. I watched them fall from the top step, feeling the same release settle into my chest. For months, everything inside me had been held tight by fear and suspicion. Today, the world remembered how to move again. The compass in my purse shifted with the gusts, a faint metallic click, announcing that its needle had found something it had been waiting to recognize. The hearing had ended less than an hour earlier, yet the judge's voice clung to me like the last chord of a long, unfinished song. Guardianship petition dismissed. Evidence of fraud, forgery, and coercion will be forwarded to the district attorney. No raised tones, no dramatic pauses, just the clean, irreversible cut of the law doing what the law was designed to do. Inside the house, the quiet felt different. Not the monitoring silence I had lived with, not the silence of being doubted. This was a quiet with air in it, a quiet that let my lungs work. I set my purse on the table. The compass slid into a steady resting place, almost as if it trusted the room again. I ran my hand along the dining chair, remembering the nights I sat here wondering whether I was losing my mind or simply losing my daughter. It was never my mind. A car door shut outside. Through the window, I saw Jordan hurrying toward the porch, one arm shielding a folder from the restless wind. His shoes stamped thin, wet marks on the walkway. His glasses fogged around the edges, but his focus was sharp. When I opened the door, he lifted the folder slightly. "This is the last piece," he said. "Everything the DA will want." We sat at the dining table. The magnolia branches swayed in the window behind him, shedding the last of their brittle petals. Jordan opened the folder carefully as if it carried something alive. In a way, it did. "These are the final forensic reports," he said. "Metadata trails, timestamps, the forged drafts, the financial transfers Marcus hid under Liana's login. And here's the chart showing the full timeline, clear as daylight." I traced the edge of one document. It was sharp enough to remind me of the earlier cuts paper had left on me, but this time, the cut felt like closure, not injury. "You were right from the beginning," Jordan added quietly. I let the words settle, but didn't claim them. Being right had never been the point. Being safe was. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Soft, hesitant. The kind of knock that knows it has to come inside but isn't sure it deserves to. Liana stood under the frame, hair loose from the wind-eyes, swollen breath unsteady. A magnolia petal clung to the shoulder of her jacket like something that refused to fall until she did. "Mom," she said, barely audible. I stepped back. She walked in slowly, her gaze locking onto the folders on the table. She didn't touch them. She didn't have to. The truth radiated from the pages like heat. I didn't know she whispered, not all of it, but enough that I should have questioned something. Her voice trembled. The judge showed the forged signature, and I recognized the angle of the L. It wasn't mine, and still it felt like my hand hurt from signing something I didn't sign. Her shoulders folded inward. I kept choosing Marcus because choosing him felt like choosing my marriage. I didn't realize I was choosing him over you. For a moment, she pressed her palm against her forehead, as if bracing herself for a truth heavier than the legal documents. "Mom, I walked you toward this. I walked my own mother into a trap." Outside, a gust slapped magnolia petals against the window with soft, scattered thuds, each one landing like a reminder. Jordan stood up, sensing the conversation required space. Before leaving, he placed one last document in front of me. "This one is yours. The complete map of everything he intended." I nodded in gratitude. When the door closed behind him, silence filled the room again, honest and unfiltered. Liana stared at the document. Is there anything left for me to fix? Her question was not a plea for forgiveness. It was a plea for direction, for a way to return to something she feared she had broken beyond repair. "You can start," I said, "by not choosing fear anymore." She swallowed hard. The wind pushed more petals across the yard, scattering them under the window in small, restless circles. I reached into my purse and lifted the compass. The brass warmed instantly against my skin. For weeks, the needle had spun listlessly, mirroring the disorientation inside me. Now it steadied, firm, sure. The north it pointed to was not a direction, but a condition of spirit. Mom, Liana whispered again. "Can I come back from this?" I looked at her, really looked. In her eyes, I saw regret awakening and a fragile willingness to own the truth. Whether she would walk through it was a path only she could choose. "Truth is the only road home," I said. "If you take it, you won't walk alone." A long breath escaped her. She nodded slowly, not in resolution, but in recognition. The first step wasn't forgiveness. The first step was honesty. The wind quieted enough for me to hear the faint metallic settling of the compass in my hand. The needle didn't tremble. It didn't hesitate. It held steady, pointing towards something I thought I had lost, my sense of north. 3 months later. The ground still breathed from last night's storm, sending thin curls of steam into the warming air. When I knelt beside the broken patch of soil, the earth parted easily under my hands, soft and welcoming as if it had been preparing for this moment long before I arrived. A droplet slid from a surviving magnolia leaf and landed on my wrist, warm, certain. A reminder that storms take, but they also clear the space needed for something new to root. I lowered the young magnolia sapling into the hollow. Its roots reached downward with quiet confidence, not rushing, not hesitating, simply claiming a place to grow. I brushed the soil around it gently, the morning sun filtering through the older branches above me, scattering patches of gold across my forearms. Behind me, through the window, the compass rested on the dining table. The needle pointed steady. For weeks it had spun lost in a confusion not its own. Now it had chosen a direction again. I had too. I stood slowly wiping damp soil from my palms. The air smelled like wet bark and new beginnings. The storm had torn branches, but it had not broken the tree. And here in the patch of earth I had tended for 30 years, a new magnolia would grow. Footsteps whispered across the walkway, familiar, hesitant, carrying a weight no storm had caused. When I turned, Liana stood at the edge of the yard. Her hair fell loosely around her face. She wore no makeup. Her jacket hung without shape, as if she had not cared enough to straighten it before leaving the house. A single magnolia petal clung to her shoulder, refusing to fall until she acknowledged it. She didn't speak until I gave a small nod. I wasn't sure if I should come, she said, voice low. Calling felt wrong. Like calling would be asking for forgiveness before I earned it. Her eyes drifted to the sapling. You planted a new one. Yes, I answered. The storm took the old branch. She swallowed hard. I understand storms better now. She stepped closer, boots brushing fallen leaves. Mom, I'm not here to explain anything. I think I've explained enough to myself to last year's. She paused. Her breath trembled. I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I'm asking if you'd let me learn how to be your daughter again. The words pierced deeper than anger ever could. They were raw, exposed, true. Silence settled between us, not heavy but attentive, the kind of silence that listens before it judges. Come inside, I said. It was not absolution. It was an open door. We walked into the kitchen. The faint scent of dried tea leaves met us, mingling with lemon from the cloth I had used earlier to wipe the counters. The house looked the same as it had for decades, yet everything inside it felt shifted like rooms realigning after an earthquake. On the table, the compass caught a sharp line of sunlight. Liana's gaze lingered on it. You kept it out. I needed something to stay true while everything else was shifting. She sat cautiously, fingers gripping the edge of the chair as if the furniture might reject her. I filled the kettle. The metal rang gently when it met the stove. We waited through the warming hum, neither of us speaking. Healing does not begin with conversation. It begins with presence. When I set the teacups on the table, her hands shook slightly. She kept them wrapped around the porcelain as though anchoring herself. Mom, she said softly, I believed him because I was afraid of what it meant if he was wrong. If he was wrong, then my marriage was not what I wanted it to be. That meant facing myself, and I was too scared. Her voice thinned. I wasn't just choosing him. I was choosing the story I needed to survive. Steam drifted between us, warm and honest. I didn't lose you because of him, she continued. I lost you because I stopped listening to the woman who taught me how to tell truth from fear. She blinked rapidly and one tear escaped. She didn't wipe it. I lifted the compass and set it on the table between us. The needle swung once, then steadied, pointing toward her trembling hands. She stared at it, breath-catching. Mom, do you think I can come back from what I did? Outside, a breeze nudged the new sapling. Its tiny leaves trembled, then settled, as if reassuring the world it intended to stay. You start, I said quietly, by telling the truth. First to yourself, then to me. She closed her eyes. He told me you were confused, that you needed help. That checking your pills, scheduling appointments, managing your accounts, was responsibility, not control. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with remorse. I didn't see how wrong it was because I needed to believe him. I let her words breathe. Then people can lose themselves before they lose the ones they love. Her shoulders shook once, not in collapse, in recognition. The kettle clicked as it cooled. What will happen to him, she asked. The district attorney has the evidence, I said. The court order protects me for now. It's out of our hands. She nodded slowly. I want to testify, to tell the court who he is and who I wasn't brave enough to be. The admission cracked something open, something necessary. We sipped our tea. The quiet between us warmed instead of widening. Outside, a magnolia bud on a high branch shifted. A thin seam parted. White petals began to unfurl, catching the noon light like a lantern being lit. Early blooming. Early healing. Liana watched it open. Do things really bloom again after we break them, she whispered. They don't bloom because we forget, I said. They bloom because we choose peace over the past. She nodded, tears falling freely now, not from shame, but from release. The magnolia's petals opened fully. Light caught on their soft edges, illuminating the yard in a quiet glow. Liana breathed in shakily. Thank you for letting me sit here. You're not done walking, I said, but you're facing the right direction. She reached toward the compass, not to take it, just to feel the warmth of its brass casing. The needle didn't waver. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If the journey of the magnolia and the compass touch something in you, remember this. Healing does not arrive all at once. It comes softly, the way a new bloom opens after a long storm. Every family carries its shadows. Every home holds the weight of what was broken and what can still be rebuilt. My story is just one reminder that justice does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, but it always finds its way when we choose truth. Before you go, I left a question for you in the pinned comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. Your voice matters here. If this story meant something to you, tap like, subscribe, and share where you are listening from. It helps more people find these quiet stories of strength.